This is Win News.
A special service will be held in Bowral tonight to acknowledge those who've made a contribution to the Empire Theatre. More than 100 people are expected at the celebrations. Cinema One will be dedicated to the Painter family, who were the original owners when the theatre opened in 1914. Clive Speechley, who was a projectionist for 55 years, will be acknowledged, with Cinema 3 dedicated to him. Cinema 4 will be dedicated to Stan and June Street, who took over the theatre in 1971.
Welcome to the Empire Cinema. We're gathered here to honour special people who have made a major contribution to the Empire Cinema's history. Cinema One is dedicated to the Painter family. Cinema 3 to Clive Speechley. And Cinema 4 to Stan and June Street.
The first dedication is to the Painter family, the original picture show family in the Southern Highlands.
Roy Painter was only 19 when he put on the pictures at the Bowral School of Arts in 1914. Roy was the Painter family's inspiration for their involvement in the Empire Cinema project in Bong Bong Street. The theatre was built by Alf Stevens, a major benefactor of the town, and it had its official opening on the 15th of September 1915. The following are the written recollections of Ron Knight, the grandson of Jack and Maud Painter. Ron was an 11-year-old when the family moved to Bowral in 1923.
We all moved to the theatre house on part of the site where Bunter's stands today and became part of the family operation. The manager, my grandfather, Jack Painter. Box office, grandmother, Maud. Projectionist and technician, Uncle Roy. Circle door, my uncle Bert Sutton. Shilling front stalls, me. Electric pianola, my father Harry. Theatre shop, my mother Elsie and Auntie Nell. At the rear of the theatre was a generator powered by a gas engine. Theatre showing nights, Monday to Wednesday and Saturday, were obvious as the exhaust could be heard all over town. The building included a shop. This was open all the time and sold confectionery. The ice cream came in long cans, packed in ice and salt. It kept pretty well. Staff members were entitled to a free issue at interval. My salary, 2 and 6 a week, also entitled me to let my school friends into the front stalls for free. Father had a fairly extensive library of pianola rolls and went to some trouble to select music appropriate for the films. Eventually, around 1925, the family operation was broken up when my grandfather sold out to a Mr. Whedon and opened a business at Nowra, but I have happy memories of those years in Bowral.
Hello, my name's Charles Slater, a retired projectionist, and I'm very grateful to have this opportunity to demonstrate some of the type of equipment that would have been used by Roy Painter back in the earliest days of the Empire Cinema. In Roy Painter's time, films arrived at the theatre on 10-minute reels. Unlike today's film, it was highly inflammable, even explosive. And now 10-minute reels meant there were a lot of intermissions. However, audiences didn't mind a bit. They were kept entertained during the breaks with slides of coming attractions, sing-alongs, often local variety acts. Apart from having no soundtrack and being made from inflammable nitrate material, 35mm film looked much the same as it does today. Not so the projector. This hand-cranked picture machine bears little resemblance to the new Empire's state-of-the-art equipment, but in 1915 it was a projectionist equivalent of a Rolls-Royce. Even threading up film on this safety officer's nightmare was fraught with obstacle. Now Roy Painter would have had to accomplish this very quickly in order to minimise the booing and foot stamping whenever the film broke. Now the light source for this projector was provided by a couple of carbon rods. After switching on the electric power, carbons were briefly allowed to touch. When parted, the tips of the carbons emitted a blinding light. Now to keep the picture on the screen evenly bright, poor Roy had to continually adjust no less than 6 controls at the same time as he hand cranked the machine. Well, I'm sure you'll agree that things have certainly changed since those earliest days of the Empire Cinema.
The second dedication is to Clive Speechley, who was our picture show man in the Southern Highlands for 55 years. Clive showed all the big films of the day, from the silence through to sound when it came in the 1930s, CinemaScope in the 50s, and the big movies like Dr. Zhivago and Lawrence of Arabia in the 1960s. Clive Speechley started as an assistant projectionist in 1925 at Max Theatre in Mossvale under Roy Perry. In the mid-40s, he became the projectionist at the Empire, working there for 35 years and retiring in 1981. Fred Tozer worked as Clive's assistant in the 1950s.
I grew up in Mossvale and I knew Clive Speechley, well, I could say nearly all my life, so I don't think Clive was ever associated with any sports or anything, because more or less his life was at the picture show. As long as I ever knew Clive, he never had another job. I think it was just that worked at the cinema. More or less travel over. He'd probably get there, say, about 6:30, 6:45. Movie started at 7:30, and because he would make sure that everything was ready to go when the movie started. He'd make sure that when the film arrived, that he'd probably go through all the film to make sure that there was no breakages in the film, because back in those days, there's nothing worse than a break halfway through a movie. Yeah, well, he never left the box, no. He was in there all the time, yeah.
We're up in the modern projection box of the Empire Cinemas 3 and 4, with Richard's two partners, Gerard Aiken and David Graham.
Welcome to the Empire Cinema here. We're in Cinema 4 projection room. As you can see here, a film has just started. We have state-of-the-art projection equipment. We've really moved forward in the last couple of years in the bio box. We have Vic 8 projector here behind us with the lamp house. Compared to the older times, the projectionist pretty much had to stay where he was. He was running 40-minute, reels with the changeover. Here we're lucky enough to have the platter system here in front of us, which allows the feature to be joined from beginning to end and can run around 4 hours of film continually if we needed to. The automation in front of us here at the window, it allows us to leave and do the other cinemas. So to be stuck in the one box would be impossible.
Every film has its own program which we set, so when it comes time for it to start, we basically hit go on the automation and it starts the projector for us. Or we can even set it on a timer, so we can just set it and walk away and it'll all start for us.
Thank you for watching, and Dave and I are very proud to be partners with Richard and the future of the Empire Cinema.
Thanks for watching. See you later.
The final dedication is to Stan and June Street. Stan and June Street bought the Empire Theatre in January 1973. Many of the Sydney suburban cinemas closed following the introduction of television, and most of the country cinemas followed soon after. Stan and June made major changes to the building in 1973 and 1979 to make it more viable. Terry Halls, Stan and June's son-in-law, recalls those times.
The cinema was going through a hard time, and it was suspect as to whether, we could carry it on. And of course, the town wanted the cinema, and Stan had to find a way. We decided we had to change downstairs and move basically the whole theatre concept upstairs, which meant a side entrance, and doing away with the stairs, which Stan was a bit disappointed about, but it had to happen. We had to make it work. At that stage, on the southern side, we had Trevor Weeks' shop, the kitchenware place, which was originally part of the theatre. It stayed much the same. On the northern side there was originally the florist, Bousfield's florist, At that stage we planned that they would move to the rear on the car park that was created, and actually we put a shop in there, which was Terry Sound Lounge at the time. We started the original business there. I can remember one time in the early stages we'd gutted the bottom, we'd cut the floors to put the walls in to support the slab, and there's this big gaping hole in the back where the lean-to type section was, where the screen was. And I can remember standing up there with Stan and saying, well, he says, well, what do you think, June? She says, I hope you know what you're doing, because it looks a damn mess at the moment. And she always put it fairly succinctly. It was quite a struggle, I think, but of course, Stan being Stan, he made it work. He always had a way of making things work. There was always a solution for Stan. Always.
I bought the cinema in the business in 1993. Stan Street was an inspiration to me because he had faith in me. Now, I was in my 60th year. The previous decade had been not a good one, and my father had died early in the year, and I had an inheritance, and so I could invest in what both Stan and I thought was the sensible idea of converting to a twin. That was very important to make the cinema viable. He organised and supervised a building team under James Selby, and they worked for a couple of months and got the place up looking spick and span, and we were able to convert a 350-seat cinema to now the Cinema 1 is 250 seats, and the smallest cinema in those days was 110 seaters. Stan was there every day in the middle of winter, and I'm sure that he was then 75. His health would have deteriorated because of it, but he had great commitment. I remember one day when we were trying to line up jet rockers, we had a few people in giving quotes, and Stan had an argument with a couple of the jip rockers over nothing really, and the jip rockers went off in high dudgeon. I believe that one of the jip rockers was one of the Millat brothers. At any rate, 2 days later, out of the blue, surprise visit from the Inspector of Lifts and Scaffolding, and we had to put in very, very expensive scaffolding for that job, which cost a lot of money. I remember as the work was progressing, Stan and I went down to have a coffee at the Kookaburra. And on the way down, I'd said to Stan, look, Stan, we've got this big film, Jurassic Park. It opens in a couple of weeks' time, and I would love to have it. Very important to have this film to open the cinema. And he said, Richard, there's no chance at all. So he went down to the Kookaburra, and we all know of, or those that know Stan, he had tremendous mind and a tremendous capacity. And he said, just a moment. We ordered the coffee. He said, just a moment, I'll have a think about this. So he thought it was a very long space of time, probably about 3 minutes. And then he itemised all the work. There were about 30, 40 jobs that had to be done before we could open both cinemas. And he said, Richard, the only hope is that if we stop work on Cinema 2, that's the only hope that you can open to show Jurassic Park. And so that was it. And that's what the man was like. Stan and June and the whole family have remained such good friends of mine over many, many years. Stan Street died last September, and his wife June 3 months later. They were a wonderful couple and a very, very They were a wonderful couple.